Well, here's another great YouTube teaching for all of you that follow us on our YouTube channel. Now, please, and I know everybody tells you this, but it is important to subscribe and click the bell so that you will know when we have a special update. Thank you for doing that. I have written many books over the years on angels. I wrote one that dealt with what's called the Mizpah covenant. And one of my favorite subjects has always been the study of the levels of angels that God has in His kingdom. Cherubim, seraphim, living creatures, ministering spirits, which are what we call common ministering angels that are sent to the earth. But there's one in particular that I want to focus on. I want to give you some information about this one because it's very important as it relates to biblical prophecy. And this angel is very significant as to what he will do in the very near future related to the nation of Israel. And that angel is none other than the archangel Michael. Now, the only place in the 66 books of the Bible where an archangel using the word archangel is mentioned is Michael. Now, we do know that there is Michael the archangel, there is Gabriel or Gabriel that is mentioned in the book of Daniel in the New Testament. The early church talks about Uriel and also Raphael. Raphael was believed to be the angel of healing and is believed to be, by church tradition, the angel that troubled the water in John's gospel, where the lame or the paraplegic people were able to get in and be healed if they were the first one in. But I want to focus on Michael for a moment. Now, there are some significant scriptures, and a couple of them I'm going to give you right now concerning this archangel. We are told in the book of Jude that Michael the archangel wrestled Satan for the body of Moses. Moses died on Mount Pisgah, and the Bible said God had to bury him, and no man knows where he was buried. For some reason, Satan wanted Israel to find the body of Moses. I personally believe if they would have discovered his corpse, they would have built some big city or memorial on the other side of the Jordan River and never crossed over to the Promised Land. So they would have been living in the wrong place. That's my opinion. So Michael wrestled Satan for the body of Moses. Then we read in Revelation chapter 12 that in the future, Michael and his angels, so he commands a host of angels, and these are warring angels, by the way, will cast Satan and his angels out of the second heaven onto the earth for the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. And it even says in Revelation 12, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and sea, for Satan is going to come down with great wrath, knowing his time is short. But it will be Michael who will handle Satan and his angels. One angel of God, the warring angel Michael. Now, the significant verse I want to focus on for just a moment is in Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1, and also in Daniel chapter 10. Michael is called the chief prince of the nation of Israel. And in Daniel chapter 12 and 1, it talks about a time of trouble such as was not, nor there ever shall be. And Michael, your angel or your prince, will stand up during that time. And of course, I think Daniel 12 and 1 can be connected to the book of Revelation, chapter 12, 7 through 10, where Michael fights the dragon, who is Satan, in the imagery of the apocalypse in the future. My point is this, that Michael the archangel is the guardian angel for the nation of Israel. And actually, if you read the book of Daniel, he is the guardian of the Jewish people. In the past, the nation of Israel has fought wars with Egypt, wars with Syria, wars involving Lebanon, and they've fought 5 to 6 major wars since 1948. In one of those wars, and I know this for a fact, this came to me from someone who was involved in this war, there was a place in the desert where the Egyptians had over 40 tanks, Russian-made tanks, brand new tanks, with fuel in them, and they were headed into the desert toward the border of Israel. Well, one of my friends who happened to be on the Israeli side, they were waiting to see what the Egyptians were doing. And that tank brigade never made it in. The Egyptian tank brigade never made it in. So my friend and the troops with him, this was later on, not immediately, but they eventually made it to this real tight squeeze, this pass, so to speak, between the mountains. And there were all these tanks there. And the they were out of fuel because they left them running. And they looked, and the Egyptian soldiers had actually cut the laces on their boots and left their boots in the desert where they had ran. Well, no one knew. The Israelis filled them up with fuel and then took them on into Israel, actually captured the weaponry there during that battle. And a friend of mine who owned a big tour company was in Egypt with some former military leaders, and had heard that story, and he asked one of the Egyptian men who fought in the 67 war and also the 73 war, did he ever hear that? He said, oh, did I hear it? He said, I was one of the commanders of the brigade. He said, are you serious? He said, oh yeah, absolutely. But he said, well, can you tell me what happened? He said, well, I can tell you for a fact, because as we were moving through, we started getting word, and everybody in the tanks, all of my men in the tanks heard the word and started peering through and could see there were thousands of men in white coming out of the sky in the distance. He said they looked like men, and they were parachuting, and there were thousands, and we knew there was going to be a big ambush and we were going to be annihilated. He said it scared them so bad that instead of trying to take the tank, pull it around, and they ran. They just literally jumped out and ran away and left the tanks there. Now, the Israeli army has no one in white, to my knowledge, and definitely no military parachuting in white. So who would that have been? Well, obviously, if we read scripture, it's the host of angels. So I would say this to the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the Jewish state. And I say this with all respect because I love everybody that's on the planet. I love, whatever religion you are, whatever background you are, whatever ethnic you are. I'm a minister. So I love people. So this is not an attack toward anyone, but I will say this to the enemies of Israel. When you make plans to battle this nation, you will come up against this angel every time. Beware of Israel's guardian angel, because this nation is in covenant with God. The land has a covenant with God. Jerusalem has a covenant with God. And you don't want to be fighting a supernatural force when you think you're fighting a natural battle. And I thought you would be interested in hearing those stories.